What's up, everybody? Welcome in to a winning edition of SSPN Postgame, even if it's just by 1 point against the Atlanta Hawks in De'Aaron Fox's debut, Ethan. Man, this was definitely a tale of two halves. We're going to get into all the nitty gritty of the breakdown, but just off rip, De'Aaron Fox's first game as a San Antonio Spur obviously puts up big numbers, which we'll pull up here in a second, but does go down to the wire. Ends up being a 1 point win for the Spurs here with a foul call on Victor, as well as a putback, a crazy shot by Trae Young at the end with really solid defense, but from Chris Paul. But, still Trae Young was able to get the shot go in. Man, just what a way to kick off the De'Aaron Fox era.
Yeah, a little bit of an average second half, but with 18 points in that first half and 13 assists on the game and really
Mm-hmm.
solid defense overall, he was everything that we had hoped he would be, Jude. Pushing the pace, finding open guys, collapsing the defense. And something that he said in his pregame presser, which was definitely true, was now we have someone that can draw attention at all times, even when he doesn't have the ball in his hands, other than Victor Wembanyama, of course. And I think that the rest of the team could definitely feel that. And he was
For
making the
sure.
right pass, making the right play. And a friend of mine texted me, who's actually in the comments right now, Tanner Robertson, and he was like, "I knew he had like floaters and layup packages and whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
but he didn't realize how great of a mid range shooter he was, as far
Mm-hmm.
as turnaround jumpers, getting into the paint 2 feet, and hitting fadeaways and off balance shots, and that's his bread and butter, that's his game. So we finally have the point guard pairing for Victor." And other than that nasty third quarter, it was a really great debut from De'Aaron Fox.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been working to get the stats up here for everybody because I wasn't even sure of the exact final numbers. Obviously, I knew it was above 20. And what do we got going on here on my screen? Y'all can't see this, but I got some wacky stuff going on here. But let's go ahead and move this to where we can see everything. There we go. There's the points. So for De'Aaron Fox in his debut, 24 points, 13 assists, as well as 3 steals on 50%
Mhm.
shooting overall and 2 for 7 from three. And of course, Victor Wembanyama with 24 as well. A lot of that in the second half, which was crucial with the way that the overall team played in the second half.
Mhm.
Um, and of course, a lot of those shots were in the clutch. The putback was huge. The 12 boards from him as well, and an efficient shooting night from him as well.
Honestly, felt like kind of a slower night from Victor. I think you could tell that he was affected by
Mm-hmm.
whatever illness he is recovering from. Stamina wise, he looked fatigued really for most of the game. But I think your point still rings true. Extremely important in the clutch when the rest of the team couldn't get a basket. He was still able to make his mark, even when the play wasn't called for him, like you were saying,
Mm-hmm.
just kind of crashing the boards and making something happen for the rest of the team. Someone did say it in the comments, Jude, and really the only negative I can think about from this game, because so far it's all been really
Mm-hmm.
overwhelmingly positive, is just perimeter defense, especially in pick and roll situations. Because I get it, we want to blitz Trae Young, right? You want to get the ball out of
Mm-hmm.
his hands, but then rotating to the open man in the corner, we were just behind so often. Even in that first quarter, which we won by 10 points, like that was our Achilles heel the entire time. It was like we just kept giving up wide open shots. And Atlanta was missing in the first half, and then in the third quarter they started hitting some of those shots, and that's when they were able to go on their run. But that's continued to be a problem even with De'Aaron on the court. I'm not saying that's his fault, but it
Right.
wasn't immediately fixed just by having him out there.
Yeah, man. I mean, we're gonna get into all of the nitty gritty of the analysis, like I mentioned earlier. I'm not sure how you want to frame this one. I know we're kind of already talking about the game, kind of in its entirety. Do you
Mhm.
want to go quarter by quarter here? Do you want to just go half by half? How do you want to frame this?
I think we kind of got a nice flow the way we've been doing it the past couple of
Okay.
times.
Yeah,
Let's just flow.
I'm
I'll
with
let you
you.
lead it.
I'm with you. Okay, well, I kind of will try to go a little bit chronologically, just because I did
Yeah.
take notes in that order, but kind of just to touch on some of the stuff that you were just hitting on there. Um, at the end, of course, when it comes to perimeter defense and defense overall, And like you said, specifically in the third quarter, it was kind of like at the beginning, we were kind of going shot for shot with them. And then we started having turnovers of our own, which led to transition baskets on
Right.
top of them starting to hit shots as well, like you mentioned. And that was kind of an avalanche that led to a 43-point quarter for the Hawks there. We still scored 31. You know what I mean? That's 8 more points than the Spurs
Yeah.
scored in the fourth quarter. But man, the just team defense. This is what I wrote down at the end of the third quarter. Ugly quarter overall. Liked that we were able to stop the bleeding a little bit late, but still turnovers and letting up the intensity as well as IQ wise defensively were our
Mm.
biggest detriments. And again, that ties into that last rotation. If you let up on your intensity and your IQ, well, okay, the basketball IQ thing, you could leave somebody open. If you let up on your intensity, you may still be guarding your man, but if you're not chasing him with the same speed you were in the second quarter of this game when the Spurs were making a big run, then that's going to lead to more open looks, even if there is somebody still trailing. So that was the main thing for me. I think really, I mean, if you look at the second quarter and when we were able to go on, let me see in my notes here what the run was. We went on a 9-0 run at the end of the first
Mhm.
half. Maybe there was a little bit more a bucket. Maybe that turned into 11-0. But again, it was there were some ridiculous De'Aaron fadeaways in that second quarter that kind of propelled that run as well. But getting turnovers after by having hands in passing lanes, as well as the momentum of those shots can sometimes, lead to porous decisions from the other team. But still, again, even when you had the tough shots from De'Aaron Fox that we didn't have on this team before tonight, you still, after that, putting hands in passing lanes, getting a steal to kind of build on runs of our own. So yeah, when when we weren't able to do those things, led to some rough sequences there for San Antonio.
Yeah, I would say the negatives throughout the game, start and end with defense, like you're saying. Like offensively, especially in that first half, it was overwhelmingly positive for the Spurs, and I think De'Aaron was the catalyst behind that. Not only his ability to push the pace but his ability to create shots, like you're saying, those fadeaways, off balance baskets, being a one-on-one shot creator, being able to get into the paint despite his height, and having really really incredible footwork. He's not exactly the same player, but for the first time, it felt like we were back to having a Tony Parker-ish point guard, Jude, because TP was so cat quick.
Mm-hmm.
And in that pick and roll, he was so deadly. He had that pull up, quick release jump shot in the mid range at the elbow. He also had unbelievable footwork down low, almost like a big man himself. And I think Darren has elements of that. And we saw that in the first half. But I also think rotations may be playing a key factor in the team defense overall because we're still trying to figure that out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Long term, the plan is to start Chris Paul and De'Aaron Fox together. I could be wrong, but this felt like kind of let's just insert him into the starting lineup and see what happens. I also think Stephon Castle needs more than 20 minutes a game. I think Harrison Barnes should ultimately get more than 23 minutes a game. Like, and those are two really, really terrific defenders, especially on the perimeter. So I think is it the team defense thing? Sure, there is like the IQ element of it, there is the scheme element of it, but there's also just the chemistry aspect to it, which will be different, even if it is just adding one additional player into the rotation.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it also mixes up the rotations overall because we've been playing Stephon Castle in the starting lineup. So,
For sure.
that changes the bench's rotations as well. But I think the other thing that I forgot to say here at the start of the episode, Ethan, which I think is key, is that this is just game one. Like,
Right.
regardless of if this ended up being a win or a loss, we would have came in here and said, hey, it's just game one. But
Mhm.
I'm definitely going to take 24 and 13 with
Yeah.
3 steals. Also had 4 steals from Devin tonight. We haven't really talked too much about Devin. I know down the stretch, I saw Tanner was kind of mentioning that he wasn't on the floor here. Let me find it. Yeah, Dev not on the closing lineup. He did mention that. And there were some highs and lows in this game, but man, I think overall 20 points on 50% shooting from Devin Vassell, throwing in 4 steals as well. As much as there were some rough moments that you could criticize, also, um, I think this was an example. You know how when we were going into the season, and I was talking about how I'm really excited to see Devin playing off the ball next to Chris Paul because of just the orchestration and how he'll be set up. the thing that I didn't really, I wasn't really accounting for there is as much as Chris Paul has done awesome things for the Spurs this season, it's a 40-year-old Chris Paul. So it's not, the all-star attention tracking that a De'Aaron Fox brings. And I think tonight, especially early in the game, and then we saw him kind of slow and then hit some shots later, pick it back up after a couple misses in a row. I think he started like 4 for 5 and then missed like 4 in a row and then made a couple more. But still, I think that point, where you have like another person who really draws attention, that can make Devin's life offensively a lot easier when it comes to getting spot up looks.
For sure. He just got to hit him. He just got to knock him
Right.
down. He's getting the shots. And honestly, this may have been one of his better shot creation games as far as like taking big baskets in the mid range and trying to keep it more simple. It felt like he was making an effort to make his shots less tough, if you get what I'm saying. But
Yes.
still 2 of 8 from 3. Like
Right.
he's getting the open looks. He just has to be consistent and knock him down. Fingers crossed, knock on wood that he will do that because thus far it has been a struggle. But you have to expect that his confidence will only get better with having Fox next to him.
Yeah, and I think tonight, like literally the last episode, we were talking about, okay, this would be a night where if Devin doesn't have 20, we lose straight up. Like, and I know that again, this wasn't a perfect game from Devin, but still, this is kind of at least the bare minimum, that we kind of expect from him with this contract. So I was happy. I felt like there were a lot of moments where he got, as much as you said, he is focusing on taking less tough shots. There was this one kind of like hop step jumper that he took on the left elbow in the first half. Or no, I don't know. It doesn't matter what
Against
point
Trae Young?
I can't remember. The point is, it was like right when Atlanta was in a run, and that was a shot that we needed, and you kind of saw that a couple times throughout the night, where him just getting an easy bucket, whether it was in isolation or through a play, would be able to kind of stop a counter run from the Hawks. And obviously you saw we've been seeing that all season with what Victor has done, and obviously De'Aaron did that a lot for us tonight as well. But, when you're playing a team like the Atlanta Hawks, that despite their injuries, they have a guy like Trae Young and other guys who can put up points despite our own defensive struggles that we've talked about. You are going to need to score points, to beat teams like the Hawks or teams better than the Hawks, more importantly. Like, even if we play better defense against a team that's better than this, we're probably going to need 20 from somebody other than De'Aaron and Wemby to end up getting the win. If we're playing like the Nuggets or something.
That was going to be my final thought on Devin. Jude was like, ultimately, if this is the kind of performance he can give us on a game-to-game basis, I'm going to be more than happy. Honestly, even if he does shoot 2 of 8 from 3, because 20 points, the defense that he played, the key shots that he did hit, like that's what you kind of need from a third option. Because I also don't necessarily think that we're going to have as what was I going to say? We're not going to play as poorly defensively moving forward from this. So you would hope that the margin of victory would be better down the line once we start building a little bit more cohesion.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely, man. Chemistry and cohesion is definitely something that these guys are going to start to work on. I will say late in the clutch, there was a play that De'Aaron called when he let the ball drop and he clapped his hands. And so in the past couple days, we've at least put together one set in the clutch. And obviously that makes sense that they would do that. But it looks pretty clean and smooth for where everybody needed to go. And obviously you want to have that standard for NBA players. But with the trajectory that the Spurs have been on, I was happy to see that regardless of how that possession turned out, I was just happy that the execution with the off-ball movement, looks crisp in the clutch. We were able to implement that in a short period of time.
I've been really impressed with his press conferences thus far on the team and just talking about that very thing, getting used to the guys, getting used to the play calling. And to him, it's actually been pretty quick adaptation to our, play calling because obviously I'm not an NBA player, but the way he made it sound is it's all just variations of the things. Like what Sacramento calls with Mike Brown and now Doug Christie is just a variation of what we're calling here in San Antonio. And a lot of the variation is just like the same lettering or, acronym or whatever. It's just slightly different. So I don't expect that transition to be as difficult for him, an all-star level point guard. But another thing that he emphasized again and again, and I keep saying it over and over again like a broken record, is defense. He's like, I think we just need to get the guys to buy in to defense because we're going to score. It's about who can, if we can hold the other team
Mhm.
roughly, or if the goal is to hold it to 100 points a game, which is not going to happen, but if that's the goal, then we're going to be in a lot of games and be able to win because we have enough firepower offensively.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely echo a lot of your sentiment. I see a couple people in the comments asking about De'Aaron Fox's finger. This is
It's
the
been like
second
that.
one here. And that's what I was going to say. When he scored a season high 60 points this season in a game earlier this November, he did also have that same finger cast. It's just one of those things where it's not significant enough for him to, get a procedure on it right now. I'm sure that'll probably be like
Hmm.
in the off season.
Another thing I wanted to say real quick. I don't know if you put the comment up yet, Jude, but somebody mentioned he was also being defended by Dyson Daniels the entire game, who is one of the best on
Thank you,
ball
Ethan.
defenders in the NBA.
I was thinking the same thing, and I forgot about that comment from Martin Ferrari, and I think that that was a great, great, great point. But yeah, man, honestly, like we said, tale of two halves. First half, I think we had a lot more sequences. As much as the Hawks were missing more shots, I still think overall our team defense was better in that first half. Um, and credit to the Hawks for some of the halftime adjustments they made as well. And that's another thing I was thinking about in this game, Ethan, is this, as much as we've given Mitch Johnson his credit and his criticism at times, I'm really excited to see this team with Greg Popovich on the sideline.
For sure. That'll make all the difference in the world.
Yeah. And Martin Ferrari says, yeah, right. I think the finger was bothering him. He was 100% messing with it. Like, I'm not, yeah, I'm sure it's bothering him because they're broken. Like, that's why it's got the cast on it. But obviously he's made the decision to kind of play through it this season. So, I don't know. Maybe you'll see a game or two here and there that maybe he'd have to take a game off because of it. But again, because he's been wearing it all season, I'm not really too concerned about that.
Yeah, me neither.
Okay, let's see what we got here. Ace Spleen says Fox only one turnover versus the league leading or leader in steals. Fox did great. So that is another great point there whenever it comes to Dyson Daniels and who he was being guarded by. But going back to the team overall, Ethan, it really is the same thing. Not to repeat ourselves here, but turnovers and then team defense. Those are the
Hmm.
two biggest criticisms that I have. I think, we talked about that last rotation. That was something that you saw in here, it throughout this game tonight as well. Um, and then I felt like also I saw peaks and valleys in ball pressure. Like I
Hmm.
mentioned, I feel like we upped the intensity in that second quarter and then it tailed off. So that consistent intensity in ball pressure, and intensity on rotations as well. Those are probably what I can point to for improvements moving forward. Um, and then offensively, again, I think a lot of what kind of led to those runs and maybe some of the lackadaisicalness on defense and bad body language and lower morale, defensively is because we gave up turnovers on the other end in the first place. Um, so that's kind of my takeaway from this game, man. I wish I had more to break down because I know this is such a big game, but I really think those are the two key things.
No, for sure. And that was really the entire theme of the second half. If you really wanted to get into it, is the team defense, is the silly turnovers. We only had 10 on the night, but I would like to see how many of those actually came in that third quarter, Jude, because like you said, the intensity, peaks and valleys. That first half, it felt like our intensity was probably at the
Hmm.
highest it has been since game one of the season, probably because of the excitement of having De'Aaron Fox on the court. And then that kind of weared off as we got up. And you mentioned earlier playing with a lead. We haven't really had to deal with playing with leads all that much.
Right.
Um, but we were up 20 or something, right, going into the halftime, or maybe it was around 20 going into the half. And we were able to give that away straight back to the Hawks. And luckily enough for Wemby and De'Aaron Fox, we were able to come out with a win only by one. But these are definitely things that we can improve on. Time will improve on it. Um, and the trade deadline's also not over yet, Jude. There's
Yeah.
still time for us to address the two remaining needs in our eyes, which we talked about last video, which is a 3-and-D wing and a big man, an actual big that's a lob threat and a physical presence that can back up Victor Wembanyama when he's having games like this where he is severely fatigued. And Onyeka Okongwu, who is a physical presence himself,
Hmm.
has 30 points and 12 rebounds for the Atlanta Hawks.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. there, Ethan. And another thing to add on to that is we also still have an open roster spot.
We do.
So it will
By our
definitely be interesting to see over the next 24 hours here as we approach the trade deadline. We could get into that a little bit, not to go all over the place, but I'll just mention that since you kind of brought it up here. If the Spurs do not make a trade, there's rumors that they've been pursuing Jakob Pertl and Nick Claxton. We'll see how true those end up being, or maybe we are pursuing them but don't make a move. Well, whatever the reality case ends up being.
right.
If we don't do that, I would definitely be down to sign Mo Bamba off of the buyout market. I know that's something that a lot of Spurs fans have been saying, so I'm not trying to be like non-unique and just, hop on the bandwagon,
Mm.
but we need a 7-footer with experience playing off the bench, man. And he would be that.
Yeah, especially if the alternative is giving up a large chunk of draft capital for a backup center. I'm fine with giving up like one first round pick to get a Nick Claxton or to get a Jakob Pertl. If it's going to be any more than that,
Yeah.
I think I would just wait till free agency, especially like you
Or
said,
the
Mo Bamba
draft.
or the draft. And Mo Bamba's, he's more than serviceable. He's had meaningful minutes on some teams in the NBA in previous years, and right now he's just sitting at home. And he is a 7-footer, and he's not a big presence. He's not like Shaq,
Right.
but he's a shot blocker, and he's going to be more formidable than a Zach Collins was, a Mamu Kelashvili, or honestly, even a Charles Bassey.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. And, Ace Spleen's making a good point about one of the transactions that happened today. Daniel Theis was dumped to OKC with a free draft pick. That's a center I would have liked for the Spurs. I definitely agree. But I think, there's so many centers out there that are just serviceable backup bigs that I think Spurs fans would like. But your boy Drew Eubanks, Ethan, I wasn't sure if it would maybe be a possibility, but I saw that CD just got flipped. So, some of these guys, role players like that have been moved, they can get kind of flipped again. There's not like some trade exception stuff in there that would prevent
Mhm.
that. So we had a comment about it on our last video. And as much as Drew Eubanks is your version of my Dom Barlow, genuinely, Drew Eubanks is actually, the way that he plays is exactly what the Spurs need off the bench.
I would love to have Drew Eubanks back on the team. I don't think it's going to happen. I think he's found his temporary home in LA. Wish him the best of luck. But think about how exciting it would be to have Chris Paul and Drew Eubanks running a pick and roll, Lob City 2.0, reminiscent of Blake Griffin. I would argue CP hasn't had a lob threat uh, since Blake Griffin as strong as Drew Eubanks, but it's a pipe dream.
For sure. For sure. But I would definitely be down for it. And I think that is kind of the mold of what we're looking for. As much as
Yeah.
Drew Eubanks and Mo Bamba can be a little bit different, y'all get what we need. We need somebody who can just go in there, be a physical presence, not get completely bullied, get us some rebounds, get some extra possessions. I mean, that's all we're asking, man.
Who we should have kept is your boy Dom Barlow, who had himself a freaking night tonight, if I may say so myself.
And as you say that, Serge in the comments was hoping the Spurs had kept Barlow, man. Oh my goodness. I was texting you about that. For those of you guys who are in this stream, first of all, thank you. All 114 of you guys. We
Oh,
truly
wow.
appreciate all of you guys hanging out with us talking Spurs tonight. Thank you guys so much for the support and the viewership. But if you guys don't know, I had I don't know what you would call it. I had an
Man crush.
affinity. Yeah, there you go. There you go. An affinity, man crush, whatever you want to call it, for Dominic Barlow over the past 2 seasons. Just in the sense that when we signed him as this undrafted 2-way guy from, I was about to say the G League Ignite. It wasn't the G League Ignite. It was Overtime Elite,
Hmm.
another league in Atlanta. I'm sure a lot of you guys already know about this. But anyways, the point is, I was a big fan of him, and I really felt like he had some potential, despite being an undrafted 2-way guy. So the fact that he almost went crazy and almost
Mm.
dunked on Wemby in this game and was making plays, kind of leading the comeback to
3
tie
blocks.
it, man, against us. I was
Mm.
just like, bro, you're not telling me that in De'Aaron Fox's debut, Dominic Barlow is about to come in here and win the game. Like,
I know.
that would have just been like, not even all the stuff with me aside, just the fact that he was a former Spur, that would have like
Poetic.
that would have just ruined a lot of people's nights.
Yeah. You would have been probably the only person that was actually semi-happy if that had happened.
No. See, I love my boy Dom Beasy, but not on De'Aaron Fox's debut, man. I want the
Mm.
win.
No, I don't blame you at all. Hector Jimenez, that's a pretty good comment right there. I don't think this is gonna happen, but this would be really
I would love
cool.
that.
Yeah, Kessler and Cam Johnson. I think they want 2 firsts for Cam Johnson. Now, whether or not he's worth that is up for debate, but Kessler, that would be a 3rd first-round pick. Then we start getting lean on the draft capital, Jude. I don't know if the Spurs would be willing to pull the trigger on that. But it makes sense on paper. Like, if this was
I would
2K,
I
I
would
would
love
do it
to
100%.
look if there's a solid offer where it's reasonable and we can still have like a solid 9 to 10 man rotation and we can acquire both of those guys. I'm 100% for that, obviously.
Mm.
But I think a lot of Spurs fans would be for that too.
At the rate these guys are getting traded for right now, maybe we could just throw like 4 second-round picks in there and be able to acquire a
Right.
Walker Kessler
We have
or
so
something.
many, dude.
Exactly,
We
exactly.
got 4 from the freaking was it Devontae Graham or Josh Richardson, or that was the same trade.
Yeah, it was the same trade. Regardless of what happens though, Jude, whether or not we make another trade or
Uh-huh.
we stay pat with this team, I think our prediction of safely being play-in caliber is guaranteed. I think we have to shoot for the 7th or 8th seed. Only reason I'm not saying 6th seed right now, Jude, um, 1, defense for sure, and 2, the rest of the teams in the West are just so good. I just don't
Oh,
know if they're gonna start losing.
dude, we didn't even mention that Jimmy Butler got inserted to the Golden State Warriors today at
Right.
halftime. Like, oh yeah, that's just another little thing added to the Western Conference. No, man, it's right now
It's
it is
tough.
crazy. It's crazy stacked. The Spurs have a tough road ahead. This was not the prettiest second half, but a win is a win,
Mhm.
and just got to keep building on this rodeo road trip, man, because we really don't have a choice.
You gotta believe. You have to believe. And now, are we better than the Kings or the 8th seed? Yes or no? They just got Jonas Valanciunas today.
Yeah, and the are they tied with the Warriors? Here, let me just pull it up. I got this up right here. Let me just
They
pull up
are
the standings.
not. Or they are. Yeah, the Kings, Suns,
That's what I
and
was gonna say.
Warriors are all tied at 8,
I
9, and
couldn't
10.
I couldn't remember exactly, but yeah, pull that up for us here. Um, well, the Kings are at the 8 seed. Oh my goodness. Um,
I don't think we're gonna catch Minnesota.
right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's when I say this, I'm not saying the Spurs are for sure going to be the 8th seed, but do the Spurs have the ability to get to the 8th seed? I think that they do, but that is also not me predicting that. At the end of the day, really what I think the Spurs goal should be is just to get into the play-in. And that's what we kind of talked about last time. And that's
Rich,
what I think they can do.
I agree with you. Richard Jefferson, during the commentary,
Right.
said if De'Aaron Fox had been on the team with this roster, game 1, it's a very different. It's a very different outlook for the Spurs right now. They're probably a playoff team,
Yeah.
and I think
I
I agree with him.
I heard what he was saying, when he was talking about that, and it was kind of even, it was earlier in the game, but it was still like late second quarter where we had seen, a good bit of him. And he was like, this team, they don't look that far off. That was how he said it. And that's not us sitting here saying the Spurs are going to win the championship this year. I think me and Ethan would say that is not
That's
going
not
to
happening.
happen. But adding De'Aaron Fox is significant. And as much as there were some negatives that were similar to the same negatives we've been seeing this entire season in the second half, adding him still can make up for some of those type of things like we saw tonight, even if it's a 1-point win.
Couldn't have said it better myself, my friend. And you know who is available right now and is sitting in Miami? Kyle Anderson. Let's bring him home. Bring Slow Mo back to sanity. He doesn't fix any of our problems.
He did, but
Let's
just
bring him
bring
back.
Slow-Mo back. Okay.
Just cuz. We'll give you David Duke Jr. in 2 seconds.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Brandon Brown says this in the comments. We're about to wrap the episode up here, guys, but he says, I hate to say it, but it may be better for us to miss the play-in this year. It would no doubt be good for the team, but this draft is going to be good. The reason I bring this up is because one of our other frequent commenters, blah, 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 also brought this up in his comments that he leaves a ton of comments on our videos. But
Shout out blah
that
blah blah.
that was something that he was saying essentially that like it's as much as he would like to make the playoffs, it would be better for the Spurs to be just outside of it to secure 2 lottery picks and, just building for the future, et cetera, et cetera. Now, with that being said, I think what we saw tonight, and I think he would agree with this too, is that the Spurs are definitely going to try to win games. They're not going to try to lose games. It's not going to be 2022, 2023. But with all of that being said, I'm losing my train of thought.
You kind of understand. I sound like you were saying, I understand where you're coming from with this draft being loaded, but it's probably
That's exactly what I was going to say. Thank you. Yeah, I was going to say, but with all of that being said, I do understand the sentiment of some people saying that missing the playoffs would be better for the future of the Spurs and building the roster for a championship moving forward. But I think at the end of the day, I still want to make the playoffs. That's what I was trying to say.
And whose pick do we currently have, Jude, that's lost 9 of their last 10 games?
The Hawks?
The Atlanta Hawks. With Jalen Johnson's injury, they seem to be on a downward trajectory. Now, they're still, I think, 9 or 10 in their conference. But if they keep up this losing streak, that pick might be more valuable than we had anticipated like 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%, Ethan. I think that is pretty much all of my thoughts that I have on the playoff race as well as this game. Are there any that you have left?
I'm ready to win some games, Jude. Let's get a streak together.
And I'm excited that we can kind of view games in this lens where it's just about, okay, like again, if Devin has 10 points tonight and he shoots 5 for 18, it's much easier to identify where what needs to improve and what doesn't. But the last thing that I will say here, Ethan, on the last episode that we recorded, I kind of slipped out. I got a little excited when we were talking about De'Aaron Fox, and I suggested that he was better than prime Chris Paul defensively.
I don't even remember you saying that.
Okay, yeah. And I so when we were talking about him, versus Chris Paul defensively as of right now, when you were saying he might be a little bit better than him, I said, I was like, he might even be better than prime Chris Paul. And I'm just thinking about, Chris Paul being 6 foot and sometimes getting picked on a little bit defensively because of his size. But that doesn't take away the 7 all defensive first teams and like the 5 steals leaders that CP3 has that De'Aaron Fox does not have. I was just getting excited, thinking about De'Aaron being a little bit lengthier and a little bit faster. But just wanted to say I was very wrong on that. Just was a little excited about the Spurs getting De'Aaron Fox, of course.
You're totally fine. To today, I don't think it's even a comparison between the two. I think De'Aaron Fox wins today. But Chris Paul's 39 years old. I thought he played pretty good defense.
I was going to say, though,
not playing great defense, I thought he did really well.
And here's another crazy point. Chris Paul's only got like 4 less steals than De'Aaron Fox this season.
He's still the man when it comes to picking people's pockets.
Mm-hmm. And now I will say, De'Aaron Fox also had 3 steals tonight, so that gap might be a little bit higher after tonight. But still, CP3's defense, of course, Hall of Famer, one of the best ever.
Smart, very smart. I love his late contests where he just like jumps from 20 feet away from you. That's the funniest thing ever.
Absolutely. Brandon Brown, we appreciate you, my man. He says, I liked and subscribed. Keep up the great work. Morals TK, I've seen you in here. He's given CP3 some shouts defensively for his size. And yeah, man, we appreciate all of you guys. Sorry for the analysis being a little bit shorter, but honestly, with De'Aaron Fox coming in, it makes things a little bit simpler.
Damn right it does.
We appreciate you guys. Thanks for hanging out with us. If you enjoyed the content, hit that like and that subscribe button below. If you want to stay updated with the show, follow us on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, at SSPN on YT, at Jude McLaren, and at Ethan_Quintero. You can also hit that notification bell to see whenever we post a new video. We'll catch y'all later. Go Spurs, go!